On a warm summer day in 2019, two children vanished. There was no Amber Alert, no frantic nationwide search led by their mother, and no desperate television interviews begging for their safe return. Instead, something far stranger happened. Their mother went to Hawaii. And while investigators searched for answers, she got married. For months, police asked a simple question: where are the children? The answer would lead investigators into a world of apocalyptic prophecy, secret spiritual rankings, mysterious deaths, and beliefs so extreme that prosecutors would later argue they helped pave the way for the murder. This is the story of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, and the children who never came home. Welcome to Behind the Yellow Tape. I'm Mimi, and here we share some of the most spine-chilling, gut-stirring, mysterious crime stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. So if mystery and crime is your cup of tea, then you'll definitely get your fill here. We upload every Wednesday at 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you love a midweek dose of suspense, whether from your favorite seat, the car, before bed, or during your favorite activity, then leave a like to help build the algorithm. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss an upload. Now, let's take a step behind the yellow tape. Before the headlines, before the trials, before the world knew their names, Lori Vallow appeared to be a devoted mother. Friends described her as charismatic and energetic. She had children she loved and a life that, from the outside, appeared relatively normal. But underneath the surface, turmoil was growing. Multiple marriages had come and gone. Relationships fractured. Family conflicts intensified. And then Lori became increasingly interested in religious ideas that exited outside mainstream teachings. Those interests would eventually lead her to a man named Chad Daybell. And everything would change. Chad Daybell lived in Idaho. He worked as an author and a publisher. His books focused on near-death experiences, visions, and end-time prophecies. He developed a following among people fascinated by preparing for the end of the world. According to testimony and evidence later presented in court, Chad claimed to receive spiritual revelations. Some followers believe he possessed unique insight into future events. When Lori met Chad, the connection appeared immediately. Witnesses later described their relationship as intense. The two began communicating frequently, and according to prosecutors, they increasingly shared unusual spiritual beliefs. Beliefs that divided people into categories, beliefs about dark spirits, and beliefs that certain individuals had become spiritually corrupted. The consequences of those beliefs would become catastrophic. One of the first people to publicly express concern was Lori's husband, Charles Vallow. Charles reportedly told his friends and family that Lori's behavior had changed dramatically. He feared she had become consumed by extreme beliefs. He worried about the children, and he worried about Chad. And according to public records and court testimony, he repeatedly attempted to get help. Then, on July 11, 2019, Charles was shot and killed in Arizona. The shooter was Lori's brother, Alex Cox. Alex claimed self-defense. Initially, no charges were filed, but many questions remained. Questions that would become even more troubling as investigators uncovered what happened next. Because Charles was not the last person connected to Lori and Chad who would die. Not even close. Tylee Ryan was 16. J.J. Vallow was 7. And by September of 2019, they were gone. Family members grew concerned. Friends noticed something wrong, and relatives asked questions. Where were the children? the explanations changed. Sometimes they were said to be visiting relatives, and other times different stories emerged. Investigators would later determine that neither child had been seen publicly for months. Yet, their mother continued her life as though nothing unusual had happened. And then another death occurred. Chad Daybell was still married. His wife, Tammy Daybell, was widely described as kind, hardworking, and deeply involved in her community. Then, in October 2019, Tammy died unexpectedly. At first, her death appeared natural, but circumstances soon attract attention, especially after a startling development. Only weeks later, Chad married Lori in Hawaii. The speed of the marriage raised eyebrows. Investigators began taking a closer look, and soon what had appeared to be separate tragedies started forming a pattern. While detectives searched for missing children, while family members pleaded for answers, while national attention intensified, Lori and Chad were in Hawaii. Photographs showed them smiling, walking beaches, living what appeared to be a carefree, newlywed life. To the public, the contrast was shocking. 2 children were missing, their mother seemed unconcerned, the pressure mounted. Police demanded proof that JJ and Tylee were safe. No proof came. The mystery deepened. In June of 2020, investigators searched Chad Daybell's property in Idaho. What they found would horrify the nation. Human remains buried on the property. The remains were later identified as J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan. After months of uncertainty, the search was over. The outcome was devastating. The discovery transformed the case forever. No longer a missing persons mystery. Now, it was a murder investigation, and investigators were only beginning to understand the scope of what had happened. Defense attorneys challenged portions of the evidence and the prosecution's theories. But after lengthy court proceedings, juries returned guilty verdicts. Lori Vallow Daybell received multiple life sentences. Chad Daybell was convicted and sentenced to death. The legal process continues through appeals, but the verdicts mark the culmination of one of the most extraordinary criminal investigations in recent memory. In the end, this case leaves behind more questions than answers. How did so many warning signs go unnoticed? How did extreme beliefs evolve into real-world tragedy? And could anything have stopped what happened? For the families left behind, those questions may never be fully answered. But 2 names remain at the center of the story: Tylee Ryan and J.J. Vallow, a sister and brother whose appearance forced the world to look closer, and whose memory continues to define a case that shocked millions. If you enjoyed this episode, and if you aren't already, make sure you're following Behind the Yellow Tape for more true crime stories drawn from court records, investigative files, and public reporting. And remember, sometimes the most frightening mysteries aren't hidden in the dark. They're trying to hide in plain sight. I'm Mimi, and this has been a step behind the yellow tape.